The wind swept across the rooftop bar high above Seattle, as if the cold itself wanted to listen in on what was about to happen. The city glowed below in fractured reflections of gold and blue, a glittering map of lives that had nothing to do with the trap being set tonight. Mark Levin adjusted the tiny lens hidden inside a floral centerpiece, while Olivia Chen tested the wireless stream on her phone. Her breath tightening each time the signal flickered. Shane Walsh kept watch, by the entrance tapping his foot with the nervous energy of someone who knew he was crossing a line but had already decided he did not care. All three of them worked for Evercrest Capital, a financial empire where ambition was currency and insecurity was the unspoken language. Tonight they whispered in that language fluently. Mark leaned toward the others, his voice low but sharp. "Tonight we show the world who Ethan Hale really is." Olivia kept her eyes on the live feed as the camera adjusted to the dim lighting. "You sound too confident. What if he is as genuine as he acts?" Mark scoffed. "No billionaire is that pure. He built an entire public image on kindness and inclusion. It is all branding, all smoke." Shane swallowed hard. "And we are sure the board will see this," Mark replied without hesitation. "Once the video goes public, they will have no choice. No one wants a chairman who humiliates a deaf woman on a date." Olivia looked around nervously. The moral line they were crossing hung in the air thin and fragile, but Mark's bitterness crushed it with ease. He added, "Tonight we prove the millionaire hero is nothing but a fraud." Downstairs, the elevator chimed, the door opened. Lila Moreno stepped inside. The rooftop bar with the quiet uncertainty of someone who had learned to enter every room cautiously. Her thrift store denim jacket was too thin for the winter air, but she wrapped it around herself like a borrowed shield. Her hair fell across her cheeks in gentle waves, partially hiding the hearing aids she never bothered to disguise. As she approached the host stand, the hostess greeted her with a soft smile. Lila focused on the hostess's lips, reading the shape of each word with precise attention. When the hostess pointed toward the reserved table, Lila nodded and signed a quick thank you. A couple at the nearby bar stared in mild curiosity, the kind that stung more than blatant rudeness. Lila felt it. She always did. Yet she walked toward the table anyway. She wanted to try. One more time. Shane muttered under his breath. "There she is, perfect." Mark locked the camera angle on Lila's face and grinned with professional cruelty. When Ethan arrives and sees she is deaf, he will bolt. People like him always bolt. Olivia did not answer. Something about Lila, her quiet composure in the face of strangers' stares, made Olivia feel a tightness she could not name. Lila smoothed the napkin on her lap eyes, flicking nervously to the door each time it opened. The string lights above her flickered softly. Each flicker mirrored the small tremor in her chest that came whenever she dared hope things might not go wrong. Down in the elevator lobby, Ethan Hale stepped out with the unintentional aura of someone used to being watched. The tailored charcoal coat, the crisp shirt collar, the quiet confidence of a man who had climbed out of foster care and into the upper echelons of the financial world. He checked his watch, a rare sign of anxiety from someone always composed. He ran a hand through his dark hair and entered the bar. The moment he appeared, the atmosphere shifted. A couple whispered his name. A waiter stiffened in surprise. Even people who pretended not to care about billionaires tended to glance twice at Ethan. He had that effect. Shane cursed under his breath. Showtime. Ethan scanned the room. When he saw Lila, his steps slowed. She sat alone, shoulders slightly tense, staring down at her hands as if rehearsing a line she might never say aloud. Their eyes met, and for the briefest second she looked away, as if bracing for rejection she knew too well. Mark whispered excitedly, "Here we go." He zoomed in on Ethan's face, waiting for the disgust, the pity, the awkward smile, the excuse, anything that would crack the image Ethan had spent years building. Ethan exhaled once. Then he walked toward Lila. Every head near the bar turned. Lila saw him approaching and straightened her posture, preparing herself for what always came next. The hesitation, the forced politeness, the slow realization, the apology followed by the retreat. Ethan reached the table and paused. For a moment, the rooftop bar seemed to quiet around them. Mark held his breath. Olivia's fingers hovered over the record button. Shane leaned forward as if this single moment would determine the rest of his career. Ethan stepped in front of Lila's chair, and she looked up at him with guarded eyes. She saw his mouth form the beginning of a greeting. She prepared to read his lips, but Ethan did not speak. He placed a hand gently on his chest. Then he lifted both hands and signed, "Lila, good evening, I am Ethan. It is truly good to meet you." The restaurant froze. Olivia's phone slipped in her hand. Shane's jaw dropped. Mark swore under his breath as the entire plan crumbled in an instant. Lila stared at Ethan like he had spoken a forgotten language she thought no one remembered. Her eyes widened as the meaning of the signs reached her. Ethan smiled a quiet, warm smile that asked nothing of her and expected nothing in return. He pulled out her chair gently, as if this were the most ordinary moment in the world. Ethan sat down across from her. The cameras captured everything, the disbelief, the tenderness, the silence that became suddenly safe. And before any of them could process what had just happened, the rooftop bar felt like it leaned in closer. The city lights flickered as if straining to witness this moment. Because what Ethan did next was something none of them had planned for. Something that would make every person in that room question who he truly was. And something that would make the world cry when they finally heard the story. Ethan Hale had spent most of his 34 years learning how to survive systems built to forget people like him. He had not been born into wealth or ease or even stability. His earliest memories were of bouncing between foster homes in Tacoma, each move marked by a garbage bag full of clothes that barely fit, and a social worker who tried her best but never had enough time. Yet through the noise and the chaos, there had always been one quiet constant. Mateo, his foster brother, his shadow, his mirror. Mateo had been born deaf and taught Ethan his first signs before Ethan could even spell his own name. They were two kids navigating a world that saw them as temporary fixtures, but they became each other's permanence. Ethan did not just learn sign language for Mateo. He lived in it. He dreamed in it. It had been the first language he ever felt at home in. And when Mateo died suddenly at 18 from a congenital heart defect, no one had caught in time. Ethan felt the world tilt out from under him. He did not talk for 5 days. He sat on the edge of the foster home driveway, signing to the empty air as if Mateo would sign back. Even after he built the empire people now admired and envied, he still kept a small carved wooden box on his desk with the first alphabet Mateo taught him. It was the only thing he carried from home to home job to job life to life. And now, as he sat across from Lila Moreno, he felt the same quiet pull in his chest. Something familiar, something sacred. She reminded him of the world he came from, the world he had never truly left. Across the rooftop, Mark, Olivia, and Shane knew nothing of this. They saw only the billionaire, the wunderkind of Evercrest, the man who had been profiled in business magazines as the golden future of fintech. Ethan had built Hailbridge, the payment security platform that now processed trillions of dollars annually. He had disrupted an industry ruled by men twice his age, and none of them forgave him for being both brilliant and young. Inside the boardroom, Ethan navigated sharks disguised as executives. Outside, he showed up at shelters, donated laptops to foster youth, and created scholarship funds because no one had done it for him. And that image, the billionaire with a heart, was the very image Mark wanted to shatter. Mark had been at Evercrest 7 years longer than Ethan, and watched in slow, bitter disbelief as Ethan climbed past him when the board whispered about promoting Ethan to chairman a position Mark had spent a decade craving. Something inside him snapped. Olivia knew Mark's resentment well. She heard it in every snide comment each time Ethan walked by. She heard it when Mark said, "No one is that compassionate. He is performing. It is all for optics. We expose him, and I guarantee the board backs off." Shane had hesitated at first, but Mark convinced him with a single sentence. "You help me, and I will guarantee you the director position next quarter." Greed had a way of sounding rational when disguised as opportunity. But the truth was, Ethan never cared about titles or applause. He cared about people, especially one little person who now depended entirely on him, Rosie, his 6-year-old niece, the daughter of his foster sister Marisol. When Marisol died unexpectedly 2 years earlier, Ethan signed the guardianship papers with shaking hands and moved Rosie into his townhouse overlooking Lake Union. Rosie had selective mutism, a psychological condition that kept her quiet in most social settings. But with Ethan, she spoke in gestures, soft whispers, tiny smiles. She would hide behind him in crowded rooms, gripping his sleeve like it anchored her to the earth, and Ethan would kneel beside her speaking softly, signing slowly until she relaxed. He never rushed her, never expected her to be louder than she could be. He had made her one promise: "You never have to speak until you want to." Years of parenting Rosie alone had taught him tenderness, patience, and the art of protecting someone who had already lost too much. It also kept him away from dating. The last woman he had seriously tried to love used his name for social leverage and sold screenshots of their texts to a gossip site. After that, Ethan built a wall thick enough to keep everyone out. Until tonight. As Ethan sat across from Lila, he did not think about the cameras or the board or Mark's obsession. He thought only about how Lila blinked quickly whenever she was nervous, and how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the smallest flick of her wrist. He noticed how she watched every corner of the room, unaware of how beautiful she looked in her vigilance. What he did not know was how familiar her fears were. Lila had grown up with immigrant parents who worked double shifts at a fish-packing warehouse. Her mother learned basic signs, but her father struggled, and communication at home often meant misunderstandings that spiraled into arguments. Being deaf did not make her fragile. It made her aware, hyper-aware of every glance and sigh and hesitation from strangers. She read lips so well, she often caught people pitying her before they knew her name. She worked part-time at a coffee shop in Tacoma and spent her nights shaping clay on a small pottery wheel in her one-bedroom apartment. Her hands were her voice. Her sculptures were pieces of her she wished the world could see without judgment. She had a tiny gallery showing coming up in 2 months, and a friend had submitted her name to a blind date service without asking. Lila had tried dating before, 14 times in 3 years, 14 failures. Men who fetishized her, men who were confused by her, men who treated her like an experiment or a life lesson or a novelty. She had stopped counting the number of times she watched disappointment flicker across their faces the instant they realized she was deaf. Tonight she had almost canceled. She stood outside the building 30 minutes before the date, debating whether hope was worth the risk. She told herself she would go because she deserved at least one more try, but deep down, she did not expect anything more than survival. The rooftop lights flickered softly over Ethan as he smiled at her. A real smile, not the public one, not the one she had seen in articles, but something gentler, something unguarded. Mark watched from across the bar, his jaw tightening with each passing second. Olivia swore silently. She recognized the fluency in Ethan signing immediately. It was not performative, it was native. Shane muttered into his drink. "This is not going how we planned." Mark snapped. "Not yet. Everyone has a breaking point. We just have to push the right button." But as Ethan gently asked Lila if she preferred the seat facing the door and whether the lighting was too dim, Mark realized something he had not expected. Ethan was not acting. He was not calculating. He was simply being human. And if there was one thing Mark understood less than integrity, it was humanity. Ethan told Lila about the foster care system, the long nights of studying finance textbooks, borrowed from public libraries, and the mentors he found in unexpected places. He confessed that he hated being photographed on red carpets and preferred cooking with Rosie in their small kitchen. Lila told him about her workshop, the clay, that dried too fast in winter, the art shows that felt like battles, and the exhaustion of being reduced to her disability by strangers who could not see beyond it. Ethan listened the way people pray, with intent and reverence. And for the first time in a very long time, Lila felt the tension in her shoulders ease. The rooftop bar buzzed around them, but their table seemed to exist in its own quiet world. Ethan did not just make space for her, he met her there. And as Mark watched fury curled through him like smoke. Tonight was supposed to expose Ethan. Instead, it was exposing their cruelty, their jealousy, their failure. But Mark did not give up easily. Not when everything he wanted was at stake. He leaned toward Olivia, and Shane, voice low, tight, determined. "We are not done yet. We push harder. We break him tonight." What Mark did not yet understand was that Ethan had already been broken once long ago, and what was rising in front of him now was not a man who could be shattered by a cruel prank. It was a man rebuilt in silence, loss, and love, a man stronger than any of them knew. Lila Moreno had lived her entire life in a world shaped by silence, but defined by noise. Not the kind anyone else could hear, but the internal kind, the constant hum of worry, calculation, vigilance. Growing up deaf in a hearing world meant learning early that safety depended on awareness, that communication was survival, and that even small misunderstandings could become storms. As a child, she watched her parents navigate the unfamiliar terrain of raising a deaf daughter while juggling factory shifts at a seafood processing plant in Tacoma. Her mother learned basic signs quickly, fingers stumbling at first, then gaining confidence, while her father struggled, his hands stiff and uncertain, as if language were a dance he had no rhythm for. When he became frustrated, he raised his voice, forgetting she could not hear him, forgetting that volume did not translate into understanding. Lila grew up translating feelings instead of words, reading the tension in his shoulders, the way he tapped the table, when stressed, the way he sighed when trying to communicate. Silence in her home was never peaceful. It was full of meaning and effort. At school, she faced another battlefield, teachers who over-enunciated as if she were slow classmates who whispered behind her back, unaware she could read their lips from across the room, boys who alternated between fascination and cruelty. She learned to scan every room before entering it, to sit where she could see everyone, to assume nothing and prepare for everything. Her world required vigilance at all times. By the time she was 10, she could decipher entire conversations. By lip movements alone, a skill that made adults uneasy when they realized she understood more than they intended. At 13, she discovered clay. A volunteer art teacher visited her middle school and taught the class how to mold small bowls and figurines. The moment Lila touched the soft, cool surface, something clicked inside her, a rare sense of peace that did not require words. Her hands became her voice, shaping emotions into curves, lines, textures. Her art teacher, Mrs. Ellman, saw talent fire and offered her extra clay to take home. Lila spent nights sculpting under the weak light of a thrift store lamp, shaping animals, bowls, faces, anything that felt true to her. Her parents did not fully understand the passion, but they supported her the best they could. Her mother saved for months to buy her a small second-hand pottery wheel for her 16th birthday. After high school, Lila worked odd jobs, saved pennies, and eventually rented a small studio apartment in Tacoma, where she squeezed a pottery wheel between her kitchen counter and her bed. She worked part-time at a local coffee shop, where the owner hired her without hesitation. After realizing how quickly she picked up routines and how effortlessly she communicated with gestures and written notes, customers loved her, but occasionally someone would speak too fast or turn away mid-sentence, and frustration stabbed through her like a familiar blade. Dating was another story entirely. Lila had gone on 14 blind dates in 3 years, each one ending with a familiar pattern. Men who spoke loudly as if she were elderly. Men who asked invasive questions about her body. Men who treated her deafness as an inconvenience, or worse, an accessory to fetishize. One man laughed when she misread a joke. Another left mid-meal claiming he received an emergency call, though she had watched his lips form the lie. After the 14th disappointment, she stopped trying. She poured her heart into clay and coffee shifts and quiet evenings with her sketchbook. She told herself she had enough. That being alone was easier than being misunderstood. Then her best friend Riley intervened. Riley, a whirlwind of bright hair, mismatched earrings, and relentless optimism, believed fiercely in second chances, even when Lila did not. Without telling her, Riley signed her up for a new blind date service and paid the fee in advance. When Lila found out, she rolled her eyes, but she could not bring herself to cancel. Riley begged her, saying, "You deserve someone who sees you. You deserve someone who listens in the way you need." Lila agreed reluctantly. She told herself it would be one night, nothing more, a practice in bravery, a reminder that she could still try even when hope felt like a fragile porcelain cup she was tired of repairing. The day of the date, she almost bailed 3 separate times. First, when a customer at the coffee shop asked loudly, "Can you even understand me, sweetie?" as if she were a child. Then when she returned home and realized her best jacket had a tear in the sleeve. Then again while standing in front of her small bathroom mirror, watching her reflection blink back at her hearing aids visible beneath her dark hair, she signed to herself in the mirror. Do not expect too much. Do not hope too much. Just go, be present, survive. She chose her thrift store denim jacket despite the tear because it felt like her, honest, worn familiar. She took the bus from Tacoma to Seattle, staring out the window as the city lights grew brighter. Her stomach fluttered the entire ride. Her thoughts whispered, "This is foolish, and also maybe not." When she stepped off the bus, the air was sharp with winter cold. She tightened her jacket, pulled her hair behind her ear, and walked toward the building where the rooftop bar sat high above the city. The elevator ride felt like ascending into someone else's life, a life where first dates were effortless and romantic instead of rehearsed exercises in disappointment. When the elevator doors opened and she stepped into the soft glow of string lights and the hum of conversation, she felt every nerve in her body stand at attention. She checked her phone twice, trying to match the table number she had been given. She signed quietly under her breath, "You can do this." She approached the hostess and focused on her lips. "Reservation for Lila." The hostess pointed to a table near the railing overlooking the city. Lila nodded, grateful for simplicity. She sat down, heart pounding. She tapped her fingers on the menu, a grounding technique her therapist once taught her. People stared. They always did. Some with curiosity, some with pity, some with confusion. A couple near the bar whispered something she caught, only pieces. The words "Def Date New App" drifting across the room. She inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower, reminding herself she had survived worse. Yet tonight felt different, heavier. She was not someone's lesson, she was not someone's pity project. She was a woman wanting connection, craving understanding, terrified of disappointment. She did not know she was walking into a setup, a cruel test staged by people she had never met. She did not know cameras were hidden around her, catching every nervous glance, every hopeful breath. She had no idea her presence was being weaponized to destroy someone else's career. She only knew she was here to try, for herself, for her heart, for the version of her that still believed kindness could exist in unexpected places. She ran her thumb across the edge of the menu, lost in thought. When the air around her shifted, conversations dipped, footsteps approached, she looked up, and her breath caught. Ethan Hale. She recognized him instantly, not because he was a billionaire, not because she had seen him in articles, but because the way he carried himself was striking. Calm, grounded, present. He looked at her not with surprise or discomfort or pity, but with the quiet recognition of someone who had lived in silence too. She braced for the usual pattern, the polite greeting, the flicker of confusion, the retreat. Instead, he signed. Her world tilted. Something in her chest ached with sudden brightness. She had gone on 14 dates, all failures, and yet in the first second of the 15th, something inside her whispered, "Maybe this is different." She did not know yet that her entire life was about to shift, that this quiet rooftop would become the place where her past pain met the first spark of something new, something real. She only knew she felt seen, and for a woman who had spent years feeling invisible, that alone felt like the beginning of a miracle. For the first 3 seconds after Ethan Hale signed his greeting, the rooftop bar seemed to lose all air. Time thinned into something delicate, almost breakable, as if one wrong breath would shatter the moment. Lila stared at him, unable to move, unable to blink, unable to reconcile what she was seeing with every memory of disappointment she carried. She had not expected kindness. She definitely had not expected fluency. Yet there he was, hands steady, eyes warm posture, open without a hint of hesitation or pity. And then something even stranger happened. She felt safe. Ethan held her gaze for a moment longer, giving her space, letting her decide whether she wanted to continue the interaction. Lila slowly signed back a tentative, "It is good to meet you too," as if waiting for the illusion to dissolve. But it did not. Ethan pulled out her chair gently, the simple courtesy, almost surreal. After years of being treated like she was an inconvenience on first dates. Then he sat across from her and gave her the softest smile she had ever seen. A smile that said, "You do not need to pretend here." Meanwhile, Mark watched from the shadows, gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles whitened. Olivia's eyes flicked between the screen and Ethan in disbelief. Shane's mouth fell open. The live feed did not lie. Ethan was not fumbling. He was not pretending. He was signing perfectly, with the precision of someone who had been fluent for decades. Mark hissed, "He is faking it. People do not sign that well unless they are native." Olivia gave him a sharp look. Maybe he is. That only fueled Mark's anger further. He needed Ethan to fail, not impress. He needed proof, something ugly, something disqualifying, something the board could not ignore. Instead, he was witnessing the opposite. The rooftop lights cast a warm glow over the table as Ethan and Lila began speaking and signing in tandem. Ethan alternated effortlessly between spoken English and ASL, making sure she caught everything without drawing attention or making her feel singled out. It was so seamless that the waiter looked startled when Ethan politely signed the specials for Lila while speaking them aloud. Even the bartender paused mid-shake, watching with an expression somewhere between admiration and disbelief. Lila felt the weight of the moment pressing against her ribs. She tested him without meaning, to watching for signs of struggle, hesitation, misinterpretation. But Ethan responded to each signed sentence as naturally as breathing. She signed, "You know ASL fluently." His answer came with a small shy shrug. "I grew up with it. My foster brother was deaf. It was my first language for a long time." He smiled almost wistfully, as if the language held memories he still carried gently. Lila's eyes softened. "So that is why you did not react. Most people act surprised or uncomfortable." Ethan shook his head. "There is nothing uncomfortable about communicating. I wish more people understood that." Her chest tightened unexpectedly at the sincerity in his expression. She had met many men who tried to appear compassionate, but their eyes always gave them away. Ethan's eyes held no performance, no agenda, just truth. Across the bar, Mark practically vibrated with irritation. He leaned in and muttered, "He is performing. They always do. Watch. Something will slip. Something always does." Yet nothing slipped. If anything, Ethan became more himself the longer he spoke with Lila. He asked her if the lighting was too dim, if she preferred sitting somewhere, with fewer distractions, if she wanted the music volume lowered. He did not ask out of pity, but out of a genuine desire to make the night comfortable for her. When Lila shifted, slightly annoyed by the low background bass, Ethan immediately flagged the waiter and asked if they could lower the volume in their section. No one had ever done that for her on a date. It hit her harder than she expected. After a few minutes, the initial shock began to melt into curiosity and warmth. Ethan signed, "Can I ask what type of art you do?" Lila brightened. "Pottery mostly. Clay sculpture. It helps me express emotions I cannot always put into words." Ethan nodded with understanding, as if the sentiment resonated deeply with him. "That is beautiful. Mateo would have adored that." Lila paused. "Mateo?" Ethan hesitated only briefly before signing, "My brother. He taught me the language. He is gone now, but I still sign with Rosie, my niece. It keeps the skill alive and keeps him close." She felt a tightening in her throat. Loss was a language she understood. She signed softly. "I am sorry." He nodded a quiet acceptance rather than a wound. "Thank you." She studied him, the line of his jaw, the heaviness briefly passing through his eyes, the vulnerability he allowed to show. Something about him felt anchored, grounded, shaped by both grief and resilience, and she realized he did not look at her the way other men did. He was not studying her lips to avoid effort, nor awkwardly pretending everything was normal. He was meeting her where she was with ease. When the server returned to take their order, Ethan translated seamlessly, moving his hands in a natural rhythm while speaking the words. Lila watched him mesmerized. She signed. "Most people slow their signing for me. They treat me like I will break." Ethan's brows furrowed. Why would they do that? It is a language, not something fragile. That simple statement cracked something deep inside her, something she had held together for years. She blinked several times, swallowing down unexpected emotion. Ethan noticed. "Are you all right?" "I am just not used to this," she admitted. "Used to what?" "Being seen." His jaw tightened slightly, as if the idea angered him. Then he reached out gently, not touching her but resting his hand near hers. "You deserve to be seen. Every day, not just tonight." She breathed in sharply. The rooftop bar continued its hum around them, but the world at their table felt quiet, sacred, untouched. Then Ethan lifted his hand and signed slowly, deliberately. "You are the most impossible to ignore person in this room." Her cheeks warmed. She looked away embarrassed, but a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Mark slammed his fist against the side of his chair, causing Shane to jump. "Are you kidding me? He is turning this into a movie moment. This was supposed to be his downfall." Olivia rubbed her forehead, torn between guilt and awe. "Maybe we misjudged him." Mark glared. "No. We just have not pushed the right buttons yet." But his voice betrayed doubt. The entire rooftop seemed charmed by Ethan and Lila. Two older women whispered, "That is the sweetest thing I have ever seen." A young couple exchanged looks of wonder. Even the staff moved more quietly around their table, as if not wanting to disturb something blooming. Lila absorbed every tiny detail of Ethan's expression, the sincerity, the warmth, the care woven into each sign. She had never met anyone like him. She was almost afraid to believe any of it was real. That fragile hope was still forming when Ethan shifted in his seat to sign something else. But before he could, Lila saw movement behind him. 3 people, a camera lens, a flicker of recognition. Her stomach dropped. She frowned, signed one moment, and leaned to the side, trying to understand what she was seeing. Ethan followed her gaze and finally saw it. The corner table, the hidden camera, Mark's smirk. Olivia's guilt, Shane's nervous tapping. In a cold, silent wave, the truth hit Ethan. The setup, the betrayal, the cruelty of it all. His heart crashed against his ribs. This was meant to ruin him. And worse, they had pulled Lila into it, unaware a pawn in their ugly plan. Ethan's jaw tightened with a slow, burning fury. Mark leaned forward, whispering to his team, "Watch. He is about to crack." But Ethan did not crack. He inhaled once a deep, steadying breath and turned back to Lila. His eyes softened as if he were choosing her over everything else. Then he signed something that made her heartbeat stumble. "There is something you need to know." She froze her breath, trembling on her lips. Ethan signed carefully, truthfully. "There are cameras here. They were recording us. This was supposed to be a joke, a trap. I am so sorry." Lila's world tilted again, but this time painfully. Her chest constricted, her hands trembled, and she whispered in broken signs, "Not again. I have been the joke too many times." Her eyes filled with a storm of heartbreak and anger. She pushed back her chair, prepared to leave. Ethan reached out, palms open, not touching, only pleading. "Please, do not let them decide what this night is. Let me choose this, with you." The rooftop held its breath. Lila stared at him, eyes glistening, torn between fury and the fragile hope she had dared to feel. For a moment she wavered, her heart a tight, trembling thing. Then she sank slowly back into her seat, but the trust between them now hung by a thread, stretched thin, but not yet broken. And behind them, Mark cursed under his breath as the plan continued to unravel. What happened next would decide everything. For several long seconds after Lila lowered herself back into the chair, the rooftop bar felt suspended in a fragile stillness. It was not the calm kind, but the kind that trembled with the weight of what almost happened. Ethan kept his hands visible on the table, palms open, body angled toward her in a posture that said, "I will not push you. I will not crowd you. I will only be here if you choose to stay." Lila's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. Her fingers twitched in the way they always did when she fought the urge to flee. She stared at the table, trying to remain composed, but her vision blurred, and she blinked quickly, hoping Ethan did not notice the shine in her eyes. He did. He noticed everything. Slowly he raised his hands, signing in small, gentle movements. "I will answer anything. You deserve honesty." Lila bit her bottom lip and finally signed back. "You knew the cameras, the setup, and you still sat with me." Ethan nodded once. "I did not know at first, but halfway through I saw them." She swallowed hard. "And you stayed? Most people run." Ethan shook his head, eyes soft. "I do not run from good things." Her breath hitched. She looked away again because the tenderness in his expression was almost too much. He waited, giving her space. He knew enough about trauma to recognize the moment she needed silence. Not words, not assurances. Only stillness. A minute passed before she lifted her hands hesitantly. "Why fluent signing? Why do you know ASL like that?" Ethan leaned back, exhaling through his nose, as memories walked slowly across his features. His foster brother taught him. Mateo, my best friend for most of my life. He was deaf. We grew up together. ASL was our home. He continued signing, but something in his expression shifted to grief. "He is gone now." Lila's lips parted, but no sound came. She signed softly. "I am sorry." Ethan gave a small nod of gratitude. "Losing him was the hardest thing I have lived through, but signing makes me feel close to him still. Like the language keeps part of him alive." Lila felt her throat tighten. She understood that kind of grief, the way love could echo in everything long after someone was gone. Ethan studied her carefully. You asked why I stayed. The answer is simple. You deserve better than being used as a weapon in someone else's war. His jaw hardened slightly at the thought of Mark's plan. They wanted you to be the trigger that exposed who I am. Lila frowned. And did it expose you? Ethan held her gaze steady, unwavering. Yes, it exposed everything that matters. Her brows knitted in confusion. He reached out slowly, stopping inches from her hand but not touching. I wanted to be here. You are not the joke. They are. Lila's breathing eased with each signed word, but a layer of doubt still clung to her expression. She leaned back in her chair, watching the city lights flicker behind him. Ethan waited until her shoulders softened slightly before asking, "Would you like to continue dinner? If you want, we can leave or stay, or I can walk you out, whatever feels safe." Lila searched his face for any sign of pity or performance. She found none. Finally, she signed stay. Ethan smiled softly. "Thank you." Their food arrived shortly after, but neither of them touched it for a few minutes. Lila sat with her hands in her lap, grounding herself, letting the tremor inside her slowly settle. Ethan did not rush her. Instead, he signed slowly, deliberately, so she caught every movement. You are not alone in this experience. People underestimate you, missee you, talk around you. She nodded and signed yes. A lot. Ethan leaned forward. Let me try something. He began signing simultaneously, while speaking aloud, perfect dual communication, switching effortlessly between modalities. His signing mirrored his speech with natural rhythm and clarity. I want you to know that I see you fully, not just your silence, not your deafness, you. Lila felt something crack inside her, a gentle fracture where light seeped through. She signed back, people treat me like I am fragile, or broken, or less. Ethan inhaled deeply, and his response came without hesitation. You are not fragile, you are not broken, you are extraordinary. Her cheeks warmed at the intensity behind his words. She looked down, embarrassed but touched. He added, I am sorry for every person who ever made you feel smaller than you are. Lila blinked rapidly. She could not remember the last time someone said something like that. With sincerity instead of obligation. She lifted her chin, signing before she lost courage. What about you? People treat you like you are perfect, like you have everything. Ethan let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh, but sounded more like surrender. I am not perfect, not even close. He paused, signing with raw honesty. I am lonely, often. Lila's brows lifted in surprise. You, lonely. You are Ethan Hale, billionaire. Everyone knows you. He shook his head. Everyone knows my name, not me. She absorbed that quietly. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different, comfortable, shared. Finally, she asked what happened earlier. You looked angry. He sighed. They wanted to record me reacting badly, to prove I am some sort of fake. Lila felt heat rise in her chest again. Why? Ethan's expression hardened. Some people fear what they cannot be. Lila stared at him a long moment, then signed softly. I am sorry they tried to use me to hurt you. Ethan leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. You did nothing wrong. You are not responsible for their choices. She held his gaze, her heartbeat steadying at the conviction in his expression. Then she signed, I am still angry. Not at you, at them. For assuming I am predictable, for underestimating me. Ethan nodded firmly. They underestimated both of us. Lila looked down at her hands, twisting her napkin. You said you saw the camera and realized what was happening. What were you thinking? Ethan paused, his jaw tightening as he remembered the moment. I was angry, but then I looked at you. He signed his next words slowly, as if he needed her to feel each one. And all I cared about was protecting you. Her breath hitched. Protecting me. He nodded. No one humiliates someone in my presence, especially not someone who has already faced more than her share of cruelty. Lila blinked several times. She was not used to being defended, not used to being someone worth protecting. In her world, strength meant survival, meant independence, meant never expecting anyone to stand for her. And yet here he was, a man, with every resource in the world, choosing to stand with her. She signed, I do not know what to say. Ethan smiled gently. You do not need to say anything. She exhaled shakily, the fear in her body, gradually calming, replaced by a warmth she was afraid to name. Their food grew cold, but neither cared. The conversation flowed seamlessly in two languages, as though they had been communicating this way for years. Lila asked about Rosie, and the way Ethan's eyes lit up when he described her made something inside Lila soften even further. She asked about Mateo, and he told her stories of late-night signing sessions, childhood mischief, and the grief that carved him into who he was now. In return, Lila shared pieces of her life, the pottery that saved her, the loneliness that shaped her, the countless ways people misinterpreted her silence. Ethan listened with a reverence that made her chest ache. At one point, Lila signed, Do people ever treat you like an object, like a symbol, not a person? Ethan's smile was sad. Every day. She studied him. That must be hard. It is, but tonight feels different. She frowned. Why? Ethan held her gaze and signed. Because for the first time in a long time, I feel real. Her heart stumbled in her chest. She did not know how to respond, so she did the only thing she could. She signed something true. I feel real too. Ethan's hands stilled. Their eyes locked. Something unspoken stretched between them, slow, warm, electric. A connection in two languages, two histories, two wounds, two hearts that had never asked to collide, yet somehow fit together with impossible ease. Ethan finally broke the silence with a small, unsure smile. I am glad you stayed. Lila signed back, I am too. She meant it in ways she was not ready to say aloud. He reached for his glass, inadvertently brushing her fingers. She froze. He froze. Their eyes met again, and in that brief, accidental touch, there was possibility, a spark, a beginning neither of them could deny. Behind them, Mark seethed. Olivia stared at the scene with a growing ache of remorse. Shane whispered, this was supposed to ruin him. Instead, it looks like magic. But the night was not finished, and the truth waiting to surface next would test everything they had just begun to build. The warmth between them lingered like a fragile thread stretching across the table, but beneath it something tense and uneasy pulsed in Lila's chest. She kept replaying Ethan's confession about the cameras and the trap, wondering how something so tender could exist in the same space as something so cruel. Her fingers trembled against the rim of her water glass as she tried to steady her breath. Ethan noticed immediately. He leaned forward, hands gentle as they rose again in slow, careful signs, offering reassurance without pressure. You can ask me anything. He signed his movements precise, deliberate, vulnerable. Lila hesitated. She felt the weight of her own history pressing against her ribs. The 14 dates where men recoiled or laughed, where she walked home with tears burning down her cheeks, where she told herself she deserved better, but secretly feared she did not. Her hands lifted shaky but determined. Why would your colleagues do that to you? Ethan's jaw tightened, the shadow of betrayal crossing his features again. He dropped his gaze for a moment, tapping thoughtfully at the table before answering. Some people resent me. They want me to fail. They want to expose me. Lila swallowed hard. Because you are a billionaire. Because you are successful. Ethan shook his head. Because they think I pretend to care. They think kindness is an act. She stared at him. You are kind. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet ache. Not everyone wants to believe that. Mark does not. Olivia and Shane let him lead because fear and jealousy are powerful motivators. Lila processed this with a slow tightening in her chest. And they used me as proof. Ethan nodded slowly, guilt flickering through his expression. Yes, and I am sorry. She inhaled sharply, trying to keep her composure. Anger rose inside her like a tide. Her hands lifted again. I am tired of being the proof of things. Proof someone is open-minded. Proof someone is cruel. Proof someone is patient. Proof someone is intolerant. Proof someone is better than they are. She signed each word with growing intensity. I am tired of being someone's test. Ethan's expression softened, pain twisting behind his eyes. You are not a test. You are a person, a remarkable one. His sincerity only made the ache sharper. She blinked hard, swallowing down the lump forming in her throat. I trusted this night, she signed, her movements jagged. I chose to hope again, and then to find out it was all a setup. Her hands dropped to the table, shaking. It hurt. Ethan reached out slowly, not touching but placing his hand palm up close enough that she could choose to bridge the space if she wanted. You are right to be angry. You should be. What they did was cruel, but what happened between us was real. She stared at his hand, then at his face. You say that, but how can I believe any of this? How can I know you are not performing too? Ethan inhaled deeply. His eyes darkened with emotion, not anger, but something closer to heartbreak. He signed with steady, unbroken rhythm. Because I did not have to tell you about the cameras. I could have pretended I never saw them. I could have walked away and left you confused, but I told you because you deserve the truth, even when it hurts. Lila bit her lip so hard it stung. Truth hurts, she signed. It always does. Ethan accepted that with a small nod. But it is the only way something real can survive. She looked away, her attention drifting toward the city lights. Seattle shimmered through the glass barriers like a constellation of distant possibilities. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe in this night, in the ease of their connection, in the warmth of his presence. But her past pressed too hard against the fragile hope blooming inside her. She forced herself to meet his eyes again. What were you thinking when you discovered the cameras? Ethan sat very still. The wind ruffled a strand of hair across his forehead, the rooftop bar fading into a muffled hum around them. He signed slowly. At first, anger, sharp, hot. A betrayal I did not expect. And then I looked at you. I saw your face. I saw how much courage it took for you to come here tonight. And all I cared about was protecting you from them, from the way this could have hurt you if it played out the way they planned. His movement slowed as if each word carved itself from something deep inside him. I wanted to shield you, even if you walked away, even if this night ended right then. I wanted you to leave untouched by their cruelty. Lila felt the breath leave her lungs. The sincerity in his face was real. almost painfully so, but sincerity did not erase the sting of betrayal. Her hands lifted again, movements trembling. "You said you wanted to protect me, but I do not want to be someone who needs protection all the time." Ethan shook his head quickly. "That is not what I meant. You are strong. You have survived things most people cannot imagine. I meant that no one deserves to be ambushed like that. No one deserves to be used, especially not you." She stared at him long enough that he shifted slightly, not out of discomfort, but out of anticipation, as if he knew the next words mattered more than anything else tonight. Lila signed, "I want to trust you." "I do, but trust is not easy for me." Ethan nodded. "Trust is not easy for me either." She blinked, surprised. You are powerful, wealthy, surrounded by people. How could trust be hard for you?" He exhaled a slow release of breath, weighted with old pain. "The last person I loved sold my private messages to the press. For attention, for money, for fun." Lila's face softened, her anger quieting into something gentler. "I'm sorry," she signed. "Truly." Ethan shook his head. "I learned from it. Learned to keep people at a distance. Until tonight." She felt her heartbeat skip. There were too many emotions colliding inside her: fear, curiosity, tenderness, disbelief. Before she could speak again, a shift rippled across Ethan's expression. His eyes drifted past her shoulder. His jaw stiffened. His hands slowly lowered to the table. Lila frowned. "What is it?" Ethan's gaze hardened into something cold and focused. "Behind you." Lila turned, slightly careful not to be obvious. Mark was adjusting the camera angle again, this time more aggressively. Olivia looked sick. Shane looked like he wanted to disappear. Ethan turned back to Lila, signing with controlled precision. "They are still recording." Her chest squeezed. Her eyes widened with fresh humiliation. "Why?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because they think I will break." He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers with fierce determination. "But I will not break. And I will not let them decide what this moment is." Lila felt a rush of emotion so strong she almost dropped her hands. She signed her next words slowly, as if they weighed something heavy inside her. "What do you want to do?" Ethan held her gaze, and something resolute settled in his expression. Something strong, something protective, something unshakable. "I want to end this. For you, for me, for us, if we let this become anything." She swallowed hard at the word us. Then Ethan stood. The chair scraped softly, the only sharp sound in the quiet rooftop air. Lila's pulse jumped. Ethan signed, "Wait here, please, I need to do this." She hesitated, the fear in her chest clashing with the instinct to believe in him. Finally, she signed, "Go." Ethan nodded. Once stepped back and turned toward the corner table where Mark, Shane, and Olivia sat frozen. Lila watched the tension in his shoulders, the storm building in his posture, the truth about to break open. And she knew whatever happened next would change the entire night. For both of them, Ethan crossed the rooftop with a slow, steady stride that felt louder than any sound the city below could make. Conversations dimmed. Forks paused mid-air. Even the wind seemed to hesitate as he approached the corner table where Mark, Olivia, and Shane sat rigid and pale. Lila watched him go, her pulse thudding unevenly in her throat. She had never seen someone move with that kind of quiet, controlled fury, a storm contained behind calm eyes. Ethan stopped in front of the table, his shadow falling over the three conspirators. His hands were at his sides, open but tense, his face unreadable. Mark straightened in his chair, attempting a smirk. "Ethan, you are early for your downfall." How fitting. Ethan did not respond immediately. Instead, he lifted one hand, bringing it to his chest, then extended it outward in a slow, precise arc. The opening sign for enough. Olivia's eyes widened. Shane swallowed hard. Mark scoffed. "Oh, look, he is performing again." Ethan's gaze sharpened, and then he did something none of them expected. He spoke and signed at the same time, his voice steady his hands, cutting through the warm rooftop air like a blade. "You do not use a woman's disability as a punchline." Every head within 30 feet turned. Conversations died instantly. A glass slipped from someone's fingers and shattered against the floor, but no one even glanced at it. All eyes locked onto Ethan Hale, the billionaire they once saw only in business magazines, now standing like a storm breaking open. Mark opened his mouth, but Ethan continued louder, his voice resonant, his signs fierce. "You do not bait, humiliate, or endanger someone for your career. You do not drag an innocent woman into a trap to test me or expose me or score points in a boardroom. And you do not get to call this a joke." He signed each sentence with sharp clarity, his movements clean and decisive, each one striking the air with unmistakable fury. Lila watched from across the room, her breath trembling, her eyes burning. No one had ever stood for her like this. Not in public, not with conviction, not without hesitation. Ethan stepped closer to the table, leaning down just enough that his voice dropped but still carried. "You wanted to see who I am. Here I am. I will never apologize for being decent. I will never apologize for respecting the people you ignore. And I will never allow you to weaponize someone else's humanity to hurt me." Mark forced a laugh, but it came out thin, brittle. "You done with your little speech? The entire bar thinks you are a saint now. Congratulations." Ethan stared at him with quiet, devastating disappointment. "You think this is about a reputation, about an image. You have no idea who I am," Mark snorted. "Oh, please." Ethan stepped even closer until Mark could not look away. His voice lowered to a calm that was more terrifying than shouting. "I was raised by people society forgets. I speak sign language because it was the first language I knew. I fight systems because no one fought for me. And if you ever use someone vulnerable as bait again, I will personally make sure you never hold a position of power in this city." The words hung in the air, sharp enough to cut. Mark went silent, mouth twitching with a mixture of anger and fear. Ethan turned to Olivia. "You knew this was wrong. Why did you stay silent?" Olivia looked down, cheeks flushing with shame. I followed the wrong person. I am sorry." Ethan nodded once, acknowledging the apology, but not excusing her. Then he looked at Shane, who shrank back. Shane whispered, "I did not want to do it." "But that did not stop you." Ethan replied quietly. Finally, Ethan stepped back, drawing himself upright. His composure strangely graceful for someone burning with indignation. Then for the first time he turned away from them, leaving the table in stunned silence. He took 3 steps back toward Lila before someone else stood up. A woman with graying hair and a soft blue blouse. A woman holding the arm of a teenage boy wearing cochlear implants. She stepped closer, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, signing the word alongside it. "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." Her son nodded, signing fiercely, "Yes, thank you." One by one more people rose. A man at the bar, a couple near the railing, 2 servers. Applause began soft, hesitant, then grew like a wave swelling across the rooftop. People clapped with a sincerity that caught even Ethan off guard. He blinked, surprised by the collective support. Lila's vision blurred. She had never witnessed anything like it, never imagined the world could hold this kind of response. Her hands shook under the table. Ethan finally turned back to her fully. His expression softened instantly, the storm receding, leaving something tender and achingly human. He walked to her slowly, as if approaching something fragile, something precious. Lila did not move. She could not. Her heart was pounding too fiercely, her breath too uneven. Ethan stopped beside her table, lowering himself just slightly so they were eye level. The rooftop buzzed behind him, but his world had narrowed to her. He signed with quiet reverence. "You did not deserve this, any of it. I am sorry they tried." Her lip trembled. She raised her hands but froze midway, overwhelmed by everything. By the humiliation she almost suffered, by the past. She carried by the shock of being defended so fiercely by someone who owed her nothing. Ethan gently placed his open hand on the table near hers, not touching, inviting. She breathed shakily. Her fingers moved. "Why did you stand up like that?" Ethan hesitated only a second before signing. "Because people like you deserve someone in your corner, always." Her throat tightened. She stared at him long enough that something inside her slowly cracked open again. Not painfully this time, but like a door pushed gently by a warm breeze. For years she believed silence meant invisibility. But in this moment, silence was a sanctuary where Ethan spoke her language in more ways than one. Applause softened behind them, replaced by murmurs, admiration, quiet respect. A server discreetly placed a fresh glass of water in front of Lila, offering her a sympathetic nod. Ethan remained beside her, waiting for her eyes to meet his. When they finally did, he signed softly, "You are safe with me." Lila exhaled a trembling breath. She believed him. She did not want to. Hope was dangerous. Hope was sharp. Hope was fragile. Yet she believed him. Across the rooftop, Mark slumped into his chair, face pale sweat, beating at his temples as he realized the shift. The tide had turned. Their plan had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. Olivia sat still, hands clasped tightly, shame etched into her expression. Shane picked at his napkin, unable to lift his eyes from the table. Ethan did not even glance back at them. He extended his hand slightly toward Lila, his posture a question, not an assumption. "Would you like to leave, or stay, or walk? Whatever you want." Lila hesitated. Emotions churned inside her, fear and warmth, anger and tenderness, disbelief and longing. She signed quietly, "I want to leave the table, but not the night." Ethan's eyes softened beautifully. "As you wish," he signed. The phrase carried a tenderness so deep she felt it in her bones. He helped her rise from her chair, offering quiet support, without touching her unless she permitted it. Lila stepped closer to him, drawn by safety or connection, or something she did not yet dare name. Ethan guided her toward the quieter corner of the rooftop, where string lights swayed gently in the breeze, the city below glittering like a sea of stars. The crowds parted instinctively, creating a small path for them. Some nodded respectfully. A few smiled warmly. A mother hugged her deaf son a little closer. And when Lila finally reached the far railing where the cool metal pressed against her palms, she could breathe again. Ethan stood beside her, not too close, not too far. The city stretched out below them, alive and vast. Lila turned to him, hands hovering. "Thank you," she signed. Ethan shook his head. "Do not thank me. Anyone with a heart should have done what I did." She stared at him. "But they did not. You did." Ethan's chest rose with a quiet, unsteady breath as he signed something that made the air thicken around them. I did it because you matter. Not because you were a victim, not because they used you, but because you are someone worth standing for. She felt tears prick her eyes. She did not cry easily. She hated crying in front of strangers, but Ethan was not a stranger anymore. He was someone who had stepped into her silence and chosen not to fear it. She lifted her hands slowly, fingers trembling. I do not know what to do with this feeling. Ethan answered gently, one sign at a time. You do not need to decide tonight. We can figure it out together. The word together hit her like a soft blow, warm and terrifying and full of promise. She took a small breath, trying to steady her heartbeat. Then just barely, she let her hand brush his. Not a full touch, just a whisper of contact. Ethan did not move away. He let the moment settle between them like something sacred. And in the soft hush of the rooftop, as the world steadied around them, Lila realized something she had not allowed herself to believe in years. Kindness was real. And maybe, just maybe, she was allowed to feel it too. Lila followed Ethan out of the rooftop bar into the soft chill of the Seattle night, the air damp with the promise of rain. The city lights reflected against the pavement in shimmering streaks, and the gentle thrum of distant traffic filled the silence between them. Ethan walked beside her, not leading, not assuming, simply matching her pace, as if he understood instinctively that she needed space to breathe after everything that happened. When they reached the sidewalk, he turned to her, signing slowly, "Would you like me to call a car, or would you prefer to walk a little first?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands. She had expected the night to end when the humiliation almost began, but instead, something else had opened inside her, something she did not want to close too quickly. She shook her head. "Walk." Ethan nodded, and they began down the quiet street, their footsteps falling softly. For a while, neither of them spoke, but it was not awkward. It was peaceful. Eventually, Ethan lifted his hands. "I want to do something before we end the night. If you are comfortable." She looked up, curious. "What?" He hesitated, then signed, "I would like you to meet Rosie." Lila blinked, surprised. "Tonight?" Ethan nodded yes, "but only if you want to. I do not want the night to be defined by what they tried to do. I want to replace it with something real, something good, something ours." The last sign hung in the air, warm and careful and impossibly gentle. Lila felt her heart soften. She nodded. "I would like that." Ethan's shoulders relaxed with a quiet breath of relief he had not realized he was holding. They walked toward his apartment, a sleek building near Pike Place Market, but not the cold penthouse she imagined a billionaire living in. The lobby was modern but warm, filled with green plants and soft amber lights. As they stepped into the elevator, Lila noticed Ethan's posture shift from guarded to something softer, something shaped by love. When they reached his floor, he unlocked the door quietly and gestured for her to enter first. Inside the space was bright and lived in scattered with children's books, colorful blankets, and tiny shoes beside the couch. A small ceramic wind chime shaped like clouds hung in the hallway, and when the door closed behind them, she heard a soft padding of feet. Rosie peered from behind the doorway, in pink pajamas, her curls tousled from sleep, her big brown eyes blinking curiously. When she saw Ethan, she ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. Ethan knelt, hugging her tightly, burying his face in her hair. Lila felt something shift in her chest at the sight. Rosie pulled back, looking up at Lila with the innocent focus of a child studying a new person. Ethan signed to Rosie slowly. Clearly, we have a guest. This is Lila. She is my friend. Rosie's eyes widened. She signed shyly, friend. Lila smiled, kneeling to be at eye level. She signed, hello, Rosie. Rosie lit up almost instantly, running to grab a small stuffed fox from the couch. She held it out proudly, signing Fox likes new friends. Lila laughed softly and signed, I like Fox. Rosie giggled, the kind that came from deep inside her chest, a sound Ethan had not heard in weeks. He swallowed hard, watching them, his eyes warming. Lila glanced around at the multiple art supplies scattered on the table. A small pottery wheel in the corner, the half-finished sculptures on the shelf. You do art here? Ethan nodded. Rosie likes to paint, and I use the wheel when I need to think. Lila felt her heart pull. Could I see? Ethan gestured toward the pottery corner, and Rosie tugged Lila excitedly. Lila let herself be guided, and when she sat beside the wheel, Rosie joined her, climbing into Ethan's lap with sleepy enthusiasm. Lila dipped her fingers into the clay, smoothing the surface slowly. Ethan watched, mesmerized. You are amazing with this, he said softly, signing the same words. Lila glanced up at him, unexpectedly flustered. Would you like to try? Ethan raised a brow, amused. I do not know what I am doing. Lila smiled. Then it will be interesting. She guided his hands toward the clay, their fingers brushing gently, sending a small electric tremor up her arm. Ethan's breath hitched, and he looked down at their hands as if afraid to move the wrong way. Lila steadied him. Move slowly. Let the clay respond. Ethan followed her guidance, shaping the clay with careful concentration. Rosie observed with fascination, yawning against his shoulder. After a few minutes, they stepped back. The piece was uneven but sweet, a small clay bowl with edges that curled slightly inward. Lila smiled. It is good. Ethan looked at her with unmistakable warmth. Only because you were here. She felt her face warm unexpectedly. She looked away, pretending to adjust her bag, but Rosie tapped her shoulder, signing Lila stay. Lila blinked, surprised. Rosie had never asked someone to stay, the first time meeting them, not even close relatives. Ethan touched Rosie's cheek gently. Sweetheart, she might be tired. She has had a long night. Rosie shook her head, stubborn, in the way only a small child could be. Stay, please. Lila exhaled a soft breath, her chest tightening in a way she could not explain. She turned to Ethan, who signed quietly. She likes you. She does not like people easily. Lila's throat tightened. I like her too. Ethan smiled, a soft, real smile that made his eyes warm at the edges. Would you like tea? Her stomach fluttered. Yes. He moved to the kitchen, Rosie trailing behind him, while Lila wandered slowly around the living room. She noticed framed photos of Ethan with Rosie at the zoo. Rosie painting on his face. Ethan carrying her on his shoulders at a pumpkin patch. There were no glamorous billionaire photos, no yacht vacations, no celebrity parties. Instead, there were snapshots of a small life built with love and gentleness, a stark contrast to how media painted him. Lila felt something unclench inside her. Ethan returned with the tea, placing a cup in front of her. Rosie settled beside her on the couch, leaning gently against Lila's arm. Lila froze, shocked by the trust, but Rosie simply curled in, closer, sleepy and content. Ethan watched the scene, his expression softening to something tender and painful, like a man remembering what hope used to feel like. Lila touched Rosie's curls lightly, signing, "You are very sweet." Rosie signed sleepy. Ethan chuckled quietly. She usually falls asleep around this time. I should put her to bed." Lila nodded, rising slowly, so Rosie could be carried. Ethan gathered the child gently, Rosie clinging to his shirt. Lila followed him to the hallway door, where he paused, glancing back at her. "Make yourself comfortable. I will be just a minute." She waited in the living room, running her fingers lightly across the ceramic chime, the soft tone ringing like a tiny echo of peace. Ethan returned a few minutes later, his steps quiet. He looked different somehow, lighter around the edges, as if seeing her with Rosie had shifted something deep in him. He sat beside her, leaving just enough space that she could choose how close to be. Lila signed Rosie as lovely. Ethan nodded. "She saved me." Lila tilted her head, confused. He inhaled deeply, then signed, "When my brother died, I thought I lost everything. And then Rosie came into my life. She made me want to be better." Lila felt her chest ache. "You are good," she signed firmly. Ethan looked at her eyes shining. "I am trying." She studied him for a long moment, her silence thoughtful, not hesitant. Then slowly she closed the distance between them, sitting closer, their arms almost brushing. Ethan did not move except for a quiet breath that trembled slightly, as if the moment meant more to him than he wanted to show. Lila signed, "Thank you for tonight, for everything." Ethan shook his head. "Thank you for giving the night another chance." She felt warmth spread across her chest, gentle, steady growing. Without fully thinking, she reached out, letting her hand rest lightly over his. Ethan stilled the world, narrowing to the small point of contact. Lila whispered with her hands, "I feel safe here." Ethan's breath caught. "You are safe here. Always." They sat together in the quiet living room, the city lights shimmering through the windows, the scent of clay lingering in the air, the kind of peace that felt like a turning point. A weekend the world would never know about, but one that silently shifted 3 lives in ways none of them were ready to admit. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the large windows, casting warm gold lines across the living room floor. Lila woke on the couch, wrapped in a soft gray blanket. Rosie curled beside her like a tiny, warm star. For a moment she forgot where she was and simply breathed in the peaceful stillness, the scent of clay, the quiet hum of the city outside. Then memories of the night before returned in a rush. Ethan's defense, the applause, the gentle pottery moment, Rosie asking her to stay. Ethan's eyes when she touched his hand. She sat up slowly, trying not to wake Rosie, but the little girl blinked, then yawned, pressing closer. Lila smiled, smoothing Rosie's curls as she signed "Good morning." Rosie signed back "Good morning, Lila," before climbing into her lap with absolute trust. Ethan entered from the hallway sleepy in a soft white t-shirt, rubbing at his eyes. When he saw them, he froze in the doorway, his expression softening into something Lila almost could not look at. She felt the air shift between them, the kind that made her chest tighten with quiet, fragile warmth. "He signed you slept well." Lila nodded. Rosie climbed into his arms, and he lifted her effortlessly, kissing her temple. Lila watched them for one too many seconds, feeling something tug at her heart, something she had not allowed herself to feel for anyone in a long time. After breakfast, Ethan walked her downstairs, offering to call her a car. She signed, "I can take the bus." Ethan smiled but shook his head. "Not today, let me do this." She agreed, and he ordered a car, but as they stepped outside, his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. Ethan frowned, glancing at the screen, expecting emails or board messages. Instead, he saw a flood of notifications from news outlets, trending hashtags, blog headlines, entertainment gossip pages. He froze. Lila noticed the change in his posture. What is it? Ethan swallowed hard, showing her the screen. The headline stretched across it in bold letters. Billionaire Ethan Hale uses deaf woman for PR. Stunt sources claim rooftop encounter was staged to boost image ahead of chairmanship vote. Lila blinked, unable to breathe for a moment. More notifications appeared. A blurry photo of her and Ethan entering the building. A screenshot of the rooftop moment taken from one of Mark's cameras. A manipulated caption he pretended to care. She was the perfect prop. Her chest tightened painfully. Ethan immediately signed no. This is wrong. You know this is wrong. Lila stepped back, her stomach twisting, her ears ringing with silence. She recognized the feeling, the sinking dread, the humiliation of being reduced to someone's narrative, someone's token, someone's symbol, not a person. Her hands trembled as she signed, "This cannot be happening." Ethan shook his head furiously. "I will fix this, I promise." Lila stared at him, tears building, but she pushed them back with force. She signed, "You said I would be safe." He flinched as if struck. "You are safe. I will protect you." She shook her head, backing up another step. "Protect me, Ethan. The world already thinks we staged everything. They think I helped you. They think I am trying to gain something." Ethan tried to reach for her, but stopped, his hands falling helplessly. Lila fought to breathe, each inhale sharp, each exhale uneven. She signed, "You do not understand. I live on a line. One mistake, and people think I am helpless, or manipulative, or stupid, or an object. I do not get the luxury of scandals." Ethan's chest tightened, his hands rising quickly. "I know, and I swear I will make this right. I just need time." Lila looked at him, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "Time is the one thing I never get. Because every time I take a risk, this happens." She took another step backward, her body trembling. Ethan signed desperately, "Lila, please do not leave like this." She hesitated, but the fear, the embarrassment, the ache were too much. She signed, "I need space." He nodded, but his expression broke. "I will give you whatever you need, but I am not walking away." She turned away because looking at him hurt too much, and because if she stayed one more second, she might shatter completely. She got into the car, closing the door slowly, the image of Ethan standing alone on the sidewalk, etching itself painfully into her mind. As the car pulled away, Ethan's phone began ringing again. Mark's smug message popped up, "You wanted honesty. Now the world has it." Ethan's jaw clenched. He marched upstairs, heart-pounding anger and determination burning through him. He called an emergency PR meeting, and by noon his team assembled in the conference room looking worried. The head of PR, a sharp-minded woman named Dana, spoke first. "Ethan, we need to respond carefully. The narrative is running wild." Ethan signed and spoke simultaneously. "I will not let them frame her as some opportunistic pawn. She is a person. Treat her with respect." Dana nodded but looked troubled. "The issue is that the footage is edited. They cut out your confrontation with Mark. They left only the moment she arrives and you stand for her, so it looks orchestrated." Ethan felt cold dread. "I want every unedited second found. I want statements from the staff on that rooftop. I want security footage from the elevator. Everything." Dana hesitated. "Ethan, there is something else." Ethan lifted his chin, signaling her to continue. Dana exhaled. #DeafGirl scandal is trending. People think you used her disability to boost your chairman campaign." Ethan slammed his palm onto the table, not violently, but with enough force that the room fell dead silent. I would never use her. Never. Dana nodded, but the room was tense. Then she said one more thing. And Mark leaked a rumor that she is your new girlfriend. Ethan's breath caught. She is not my girlfriend. Yet the word yet hovered unspoken. Dana added gently, she might be getting hate messages right now. Ethan's heart plummeted. He grabbed his coat, ignoring the startled looks. I am going to her. Dana stood alarmed. Ethan, if you show up now, it will make it worse. It will confirm everything the press is claiming. He froze mid-step, the weight of that truth settling like a stone in his stomach. Doing nothing would hurt her. Doing something might hurt her more. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. That night, social media exploded with commentary armchair experts, debating the story, people speculating about motives. Lila sat on the floor of her small apartment, knees pulled to her chest, scrolling through hate comments that blurred together. She was called naive, desperate fame, hungry, a charity case, a fraud. Her hands shook violently. She dropped the phone, covering her face, struggling to breathe. Riley, her best friend, hurried over, pulling her into a tight hug. Lila sobbed into her shoulder wordlessly. I cannot do this, she signed, hands shaking too hard to form the signs properly. Riley held her tighter, whispering, yes, you can. You are stronger than this. You are not alone. Meanwhile, Ethan paced his living room restlessly. Rosie watching him from the doorway, her small face worried. She tugged his sleeve, signing Daddy sad. Ethan knelt, crushing her in a hug, his voice trembling. I am okay, sweetheart, I promise. But he was not okay. Lila was hurting. The world was tearing her apart. And he was the reason. He did not sleep at all that night, nor the next day. He rehearsed statements, rewrote speeches, argued with PR teams and called lawyers. But nothing prepared him for the moment he stepped onto the stage of the press conference. The next afternoon, flashes bursting around him like lightning. His interpreter stood beside him. Reporters buzzed loudly until Ethan raised his hands, signing firmly and speaking with resolve. I am not here to defend my image. I am here to defend someone who deserves better than what has been done to her. The room quieted instantly, cameras focusing. He continued. My evening with Lila was not staged, not rehearsed, not planned. She had no knowledge of the cruel setup created by disgruntled employees who have now been suspended. I confronted them myself. And for those who question why I speak sign language, it is because my foster brother Mateo was deaf. He passed away when we were teenagers. I learned ASL to be part of his world, not to exploit anyone. His voice cracked slightly, unplanned, raw. I will not allow this woman to become collateral damage in a political game. I stand with her today and always. Gasps filled the room. The interpreter repeated his words in ASL. Her movements sharp, precise, reverent. Ethan looked directly into the camera's eyes, fierce. And to Lila, if you are watching, you did nothing wrong. Nothing. My only regret is that I failed to protect you from cruelty you never deserved. Lila watched the press conference from her apartment, tears falling silently. Every sign, every word, every tremble in his voice hit her like a wave she was not prepared for. She covered her mouth, her whole body shaking. He was fighting for her, publicly, risking everything, not for image, for truth, for her. 1 year later, the rooftop that once held a trap and a heartbreak had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The string lights were new, the tables arranged differently, the walls decorated with framed photographs of artists whose lives had changed in quiet, powerful ways. And in the center of it, all surrounded by guest supporters. And soft music stood a small bronze plaque that read, "Here Tomorrow Foundation." Opening gala celebrating deaf artists, storytellers, and creators across the nation. Lila stood near the railing, her long dark hair swept by the gentle spring wind, her emerald dress glowing softly beneath the warm lights. She looked out over the Seattle skyline, the same skyline that once shimmered behind fear and humiliation, now shining behind a future she never expected to have. Her palms rested lightly on the cool metal, her breath steady, her heart calm in ways she once thought impossible. Behind her, the soft melody of the live piano filled the space guests, signing and speaking in blended harmony, a world built closer to what she had always hoped existed. She had helped create this. She had helped make silence a place of strength, not invisibility. She felt footsteps approach and turned to find Rosie now. 7 years old, dressed in a white tulle dress with tiny silver stars sewn along the hem. Rosie held a small notebook against her chest, but her hands lifted immediately, signing excitedly. Lila, the artist from Portland, brought her new sculpture. It has butterflies. Lila laughed softly, kneeling to be eye level. Butterflies are your favorite. Rosie nodded proudly. Just like yours. Lila pressed a kiss to her forehead and signed, "Show me later." Rosie ran off her curls, bouncing, and Lila watched her go, warmth blooming in her chest. She stood slowly, turning back toward the city, until a familiar presence settled beside her before he even spoke. Ethan always carried a certain gravity, a warmth made of patience, steadiness, and something deeper, something quieter, that lived beneath his calm. He stood next to her, hands in his pockets, wearing a tailored slate gray suit that could have belonged on a runway, but somehow looked more like armor he had chosen to wear gently. His hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and when he looked at her, every part of him softened. The same way it had the night he defended her, the night he lost her, and the night he fought to regain her trust, one truth at a time. He signed, "You look beautiful." She smiled, signing back, "You always say that." Because it is always true. The warmth in his expression was something she still was not used to completely, but had grown to cherish. She glanced around, taking in the crowd, the decorations, the laughter. "I still cannot believe this is happening," she signed. Ethan looked around quietly, pride shimmering in his eyes. "I can. You built this." She shook her head gently. "We built this." He smiled, a small, soft smile meant for her alone. A server approached them, handing each a glass of sparkling cider. The gala had strict no alcohol policies for accessibility and inclusivity, something Lila had insisted upon. The server slipped away, and Ethan leaned slightly closer, speaking softly. "There is someone here to see you after your speech." Lila tilted her head. "Who?" Ethan hesitated only a second. "The director of the National Deaf Arts Council." Lila's eyes widened. "They want to meet me. They want you to lead the West Coast chapter." Lila's breath caught. "That is huge." Ethan nodded. "You deserve huge." She pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed by gratitude, a familiar ache that no longer hurt, but swelled with quiet pride. This night was built from brokenness, turned into beauty piece by piece. But as her gaze drifted back toward the skyline, something tugged at her, the memory of the rooftop 1 year ago, the trap, the fear, the raw pain. And then the moment he stood for her, with a courage she had never witnessed before. A moment that changed not only her life, but the course of his. People began clinking glasses, signaling the next portion of the night. Ethan extended his hand palm open, a silent invitation. Lila placed her hand in his, allowing him to guide her to the small stage near the center of the rooftop. Guests settled into soft conversations, the interpreter moving to stand beside the podium. Lila took a breath, letting the city wind fill her lungs. She began to sign her speech while speaking softly, the interpreter mirroring her movements for those who needed it, the room falling into reverent silence. Thank you for being here tonight. This foundation began with heartbreak, but it grew from hope. It began with people trying to silence me, but it continues because all of you chose to listen. She paused, her eyes drifting toward Ethan for a moment, before continuing. Art is the language we use when spoken language fails. It is the way we remind ourselves that we exist loudly, even when the world insists we be quiet. Tonight we celebrate deaf artists who are shaping new worlds. Tonight we promise to never be invisible again. Applause rose warm and powerful, and Lila felt tears prick her eyes. But she blinked them away because something in Ethan's posture shifted. He moved forward toward the stage, his steps steady, but carrying a different weight, a new intention. Rosie hurried up beside him, slipping her small hand into his, and Lila watched with curiosity, confusion, and then a sudden rush of emotion as they approached her. The rooftop quieted again. The wind swept softly across the space. Ethan turned to face her fully, taking a slow, steady breath. He signed first his movements, slow, deliberate, trembling slightly. Lila, you rebuilt your world from the quietest places inside you. You showed me what strength looks like without noise, and what love becomes when you let it live in truth. My life was loud until you. Now it is full. Lila's breath hitched. He lowered himself onto one knee, Rosie gasping excitedly, and holding out a small velvet box with both hands. Ethan opened the box, revealing a simple ring with a small hand-carved ceramic stone in soft ocean blue, the exact shade of the clay bowl they had made together the first weekend they met. Lila covered her mouth, her entire body trembling. Ethan's signed voice, soft but steady. Will you marry us? Rosie beamed, lifting her free hand to sign. Stay forever. Lila's vision blurred completely, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from pain, not from fear, but from a fullness she had never known before. She reached out her hands, shaking, as she signed the word she had carried quietly in her heart for months. Yes, and then she signed again, more certain, louder, in the language of her hands forever. The crowd erupted in applause, some signing, some cheering, some wiping tears. Ethan stood slipping the ring gently onto her finger, and Lila threw her arms around him, burying her face against his shoulder as laughter and tears spilled together. Rosie wrapped her arms around both of them, giggling happily, becoming a small, bright part of their embrace. The moment felt like something stitched together from every fragile piece of their past, now forming a future strong enough to hold them all. Later that night, as guests drifted away and the music softened, Lila and Ethan returned to the railing where it all began. The city shimmered the same way it had the night they met, but everything felt different. The silence between them was no longer empty or fragile, but warm, easy, certain. Lila rested her head against his shoulder, her fingers interlacing with his. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, signing welcome home. Lila closed her eyes, letting the words settle deep within her. This rooftop had once been the site of cruelty, humiliation, and fear. Now it was the birthplace of a future built in silence, lived in love and strengthened by every moment that had tried and failed to break them. Together they watched the city glow beneath them, the night quiet and tender, holding the promise of everything yet to come. If this story reached something tender in you, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite a life, that love can be found in unexpected places, and that silence can hold more truth than 1,000 spoken words, then do not let it end here. Stories like this one live because people like you keep them alive. In a world that moves faster every day, where cruelty often makes louder headlines than compassion pausing to witness a love story built on respect and humanity becomes an act of hope. And hope matters. If Ethan and Lila's journey made you smile or cry, or simply feel less alone, I invite you to stay with us. Join this community where we celebrate connection resilience and the quiet strength inside people who are often overlooked. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story. Crafted to lift your spirit and remind you that goodness still exists in the places we don't expect. Every week, we share new cinematic stories about love that heals families that find each other and small acts of courage that change everything. And your support helps these stories travel farther than you can imagine. If this video touched your heart, please tap the like button. It tells YouTube that stories about empathy and second chances are worth sharing with the world. And if you know someone who believes in love, or someone who needs a reminder that they deserve to be seen, share this video with them. You never know whose life a single story might shift. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from. We read every single message, and this community spans from tiny towns to huge cities, from quiet evenings alone to families gathered around living room screens. Your presence here makes this space more beautiful. And finally, if you felt a connection to the deaf community, to single parents, to people rebuilding their lives after heartbreak, or to anyone who has ever been underestimated, take a moment to leave a heart or a short message for them below. You might make a stranger feel seen tonight. Thank you for being here, for choosing hope, for believing that love can rise from silence and stand tall against cruelty. This is Soul Lift Stories, and we are honored to share these moments with you. Stay kind, stay open, and stay with us for the next story.